again.
Hi guys, we're back. So yes, it's been a few days since our last one, so rather than it being day or whatever, it is now episode 127 of our lockdown vlog. Just trying to work out what day that would actually make it. So last time we did one was it Saturday? No, it was Friday, and that was day 126. So it's however many days more than that.
Do the maths yourself, guys. It's
yeah,
all part of the fun.
it's Tuesday, the 28th of July. And yeah, it's episode 127 of our lockdown vlog. So sorry for the absence, but that's sort of going to be how it goes for a bit, I think, because with me sort of working towards opening back up, I'm back in work quite a bit. So I've just got to realise I've got like a cat hair on my lips. Sorry. Yeah, so sorry, that's a bit distracting. So yeah, so we're kind of going to do these as and when we can. So if we're both here and sort of able, we'll do them. But it does mean that if you haven't subscribed, you might miss them. So do subscribe, because then you'll get an alert when a new episode comes out.
I should say though also that alert is optional. Like, so if you want to subscribe and help us with our numbers and you want to see them and stuff and have them show up in your YouTube feed, that's great. But if you don't want an alert, you can also switch those off as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We
like
won't take offence.
There's a little like alarm.
But yes,
symbol.
if you have sort of just been tuning in sort of as and when and knowing that there's going to be a new one each day, obviously that might not be the case anymore, although we will do them as often as we can. So yes, so do subscribe, because then you will have the alert if you want it, which means that you won't miss out. So yes, also we are still driving our way up, trying to get ourselves to 100 subscribers so that we can name our channel a bit better, because yeah, at the moment it's utter gibberish. So yes, even if you aren't sort of in the habit of subscribing too often, it would really be doing us a favour, because at the moment we're on about 40 something subscribers. We need to get to 100. So yeah, do please like, subscribe, share us around. Yeah, if you particularly enjoy an episode, do give it a retweet or a share. So yeah, that'd be grand. Big thank you to actually Shani Thomas for giving us a share on her Twitter feed the other day, because that had a bit of a skyrocket in that day's viewing figures. So thanks for that, Shani. Oh, to have her reach. So yeah, cheers, Shani. But yes, so we are back. I will apologise in advance if I seem a little lacklustre. I am in quite a lot of pain today. So we're back. I was back in work yesterday, but I say we because Chris came to help, bless him, because a couple of his friends were coming in so that I could kind of do a dry run of both of our escape room games. To check everything was working, to sort of check that it works with the new COVID measures, because I've had to sort of slightly change up some of the props and change up some of the sort of contents of the rooms. So I kind of needed some guinea pigs. So a couple of Chris's friends came along and played the rooms last night. So it did mean that there was quite a lot of work to do on the site. So thankfully Chris volunteered to be a bit of a dog's body, bless him, and he was a very good boy, and did help, because actually I didn't go in until about half three-ish. And actually I massively underestimated how much there was to do. I thought as long as I got the rooms ready it would be fine, and all the sort of general, there's still loads more to do, but as long as the rooms were ready. But actually, as ever with computers particularly, turn them off for several months and then when you turn it back on they've got gremlins.
I don't like it.
No, they don't like it. So we actually did have quite a bit of extra work to do in order. It was looking a bit touch and go as to whether or not we were going to be able to run host, because there were a few bits that weren't working properly. But actually, we did a few sort of quick fixes and made it happen. But obviously, that's why we do a dry run, to make sure that everything's going to be suitable for customers when they do come. And thankfully, I think it was good. It was really good time. But for being sort of on site and active, oh, I'm sore today, and it's quite annoying, because it's normally if I'm a bit fibro sore, it'll either be just sort of general, and it'll be kind of my whole body, and I'll just feel a bit achy and crap, or it'll be, I can sort of tell what I've done wrong. Like, so for example, like if I've had a day where I've sort of walked up quite a few steep hills, the next day like my thighs will be the bit that hurts the most, or if I've carried heavy shopping it'll be like down my arms and maybe the top of my back as well. I don't know what I did yesterday, but my entire back and this side is fucking agony. So I'm doing quite a lot of sort of very stiff walking around and like trying not to bend or anything. So if I seem a bit lackluster, that is why.
It doesn't help. Like I've been trying where I can to like take care of the pets and feed the animals and things, but at least one of our cats refuses to take food off me most of it. He will some like if Ellie's out, he'll take food off me happily. But when Ellie's in, it's like no, it tastes better when Mum does it, and it's the exact same food.
And I'll be like lying on the sofa, sort of like trying not to move, and literally like Chris can bring food to him and be like, come and eat the food, and he just gives you this dead.
If we had kids, we could be like, look. Mummy's not feeling very well, so I'm gonna get you dinner, and it'd be fine, and they just have to accept it. But you can't explain that to a cat. You know,
No.
They don't go with it.
No, not having it at all. So yeah, bless. There was a because at one point I did go for a lie down upset. I had a long bath, which usually sort of helps, particularly if it's like pain in my core. Usually a good soak in the bath will loosen me up a little bit, but didn't make a dent today. So then I went to bed afterwards. So I was lying in bed, and guaranteed if I go for a lie down, there'll be no cats in sight. And as soon as I lie down, and as soon as I start to sort of be like, oh, okay, I'll just have a nice little nap, cats will appear and they will want feeding. And Totem was tenacious. He just literally just sat next to me, just going like, I'm like, oh god. So then I like text Chris from upstairs, because that's the level of lazy I am, and it was just like, can you come and get Totem, he's being a dick. And then like Chris comes in and just like, come on Totem, look, I've got food, come on. And Totem just dead eye stare, just like, what do you want? I want her to do it.
But he did take a treat off me, didn't he?
He did.
Did he leave you alone after that?
He slept at the bottom of the bed for a bit, but then as soon as I was stirring, he was back on it. But you know, I got a little respite. So, but yeah, absolute little dick. But it's quite. He gets away with it. He's quite charismatic with it, and it is funny. But yeah, it's inconvenient. So yeah, so actually, like, I've tried everything. So I've tried baths, I've tried sort of like back rubs and all sorts of stuff, and nothing is making a dent. So unfortunately, I've had to resort to the wine, because I did take some painkillers, but they're just over the counter stuff. And to be honest, the stuff that I'm on as prescription meds are far stronger anyway, and I have to take those every day at bedtime. So over the counter painkillers, although they will help if I've got like other illness, so if I've got a sore throat or something, they'll do the job, but they don't really like make a dent in fibro pain at all. But I was trying anyway, so I was like, chuck them at me. So I was just like, I was determined we were going to vlog today, because it's been a few days and we were both off today, and I thought, well, there's stuff to catch up on. But I was just like, oh god, I'm literally like not really like sort of sat there, and I was just, even when I shift my weight, it's like, oh, like, such old lady vibes.
Ellie?
Yes.
I've got a consumer report.
Okay.
I've just remembered about my consumer report.
Okay.
I bought some yum-yums because we were in town yesterday doing the escape room games.
What are yum-yums?
Hard. You not even know what yum-yums are, mate?
No.
They're like sort of pastry. They're sort of long and stretched out and sort of glazed, a bit like a donut, but like in the shape of like a baton.
Oh, I do know. They sell
Sort
them
of
in
twisted.
Greggs, don't they?
They do sell them in Greggs, famously. And
not vegan, sadly.
Not vegan. But I saw them in Tesco's, and I was getting some drinks and snacks for everyone at the escape rooms, and which is not normally part of the service, I should say. Bring your own drinks. Don't bring drinks in. It's, but you know, we're friends there, and it was for the staff. But anyway, I saw these yum-yums, and they were reduced to 47p, and I thought, for 47p, I'll take a punt. You know, I'll have one. Maybe Conan will want one. Maybe even Phil and Alison, my friends, were coming. Maybe they'll want one. But no one else had them. And I had one yesterday, and it was very disappointing.
Oh, boo.
And the worst type of food is food that is unhealthy and disappointing and underwhelming. Because, like,
you want the calories to be worth it, don't you?
Yeah, you want something that you go, oh, this isn't the best, but I know it's healthy for me. Or you want something where you go, this tastes amazing, and fuck the calories. Yeah. Fuck this, I'm just gonna eat it.
Yeah. Like, what was wrong with them?
They were just a bit bland and not very exciting. They weren't
like
much
stale.
Glaze. No, they were just dull. And they were reduced. They were on their last day, but they were in date still on the last day. And if I'd had them today, I'd have gone, oh, maybe they're just
past their best.
But I had one yesterday when they were still in date, and like I say, it wasn't like they tasted stale. They were just really dull. So today, what I did is I had 3 left, and I had one. I was like, no, it's still boring. So I got the other 2 and sliced them in half with a bread knife and added cherry jam.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, that was nice. So that's my consumer report. Don't have Tesco yum yums unless they're reduced, and then slice them half in a bread knife and add jam, and it's worth it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like the urgency with which you wanted to report your consumer report there. Ellie,
yeah.
I have a consumer report.
Yes.
So, on such topics of important things to report, so real world stuff, I think I've steeled myself well enough to actually be able to deal with looking at some of the real world now. And thankfully, actually, I think being back sort of in work and doing those sorts of things has helped in terms, because I was struggling a bit with anxiety towards the end of last week. Thankfully that seems to have settled. I think like having stuff to focus on has helped. But there's some stuff going on in the real world. So yeah, it's looking like quite a lot of Europe might be heading towards a second wave. Now I take those sorts of things with a pinch of salt usually, because the sort of talk of a second wave has kind of been on the cards since we were still in the first wave. I think there is certain amounts of sort of like exaggeration and kind of what's the word for not exceptionalism, making something seem more over that. I can't think of the word, sorry. Like I said, lackluster. Sensationalizing, that's what I meant. So I take it with a pinch of salt. But so what I tend to do, and actually what I've done all the way through this, is I've used the coronavirus graphs and stats on worldometers, which have got sort of stats, global stats, and broken down by countries based on those countries' methods of reporting. So you can't absolutely compare and contrast countries, because most countries have slightly different ways of reporting the stats. Not so much with actual new cases, because they tend to be confirmed tests, positive tests. But things like the death statistics tend to be sort of a bit skewed and reported in different ways. But looking at the graphs, slightly worryingly, there are quite a few that seem to suddenly over the last few days be having a bit of an upswing. Now, one of the things I've seen do the rounds actually has sort of been a statistic that is trying to suggest that, one of the main countries that's being talked about is Spain, and actually to the extent to which a few weeks back, maybe a month or so back, the UK announced that it was going to do sort of air bridges and travel corridors between other countries that sort of had either similar or lower coronavirus statistics. So it was going to be okay to travel to and from them without having a mandatory quarantine period. And that was quite a lot of countries, mostly ones that we're fairly friendly with, and there was a certain amount of politics going on there anyway. But one of those countries that was previously okay, that has now been revoked, is Spain. And unfortunately, quite a lot of people, once it was kind of given the okay, have gone to Spain on holiday. And one of the things Spain was doing a lot to try and regenerate its tourism industry, because that's one of the country's main sources of income, particularly at this time of year, is holidaymakers from other countries, mainly in Europe. So I think Spain needed to encourage people to come. So I think like prices and flights were sort of reduced, and it was a big drive to get people to come out there. Unfortunately, quite a lot of people are in the position now that they've gone out there, and while they've been out there, they've re-established the 14-day mandatory quarantine for anyone returning from Spain. So anybody who is out there at the moment comes back is going to have to quarantine, and there are £1,000 fines for anyone found in breach of quarantine rules. So that would obviously be stay-at-home rules and all of the sort of full lockdown rules of not going out to anywhere where there are other people. I think you're still allowed to exercise as long as you stay away from people, but basically stay in the house. You can't go to work, you can't go any public places, etc. So that has obviously scuppered quite a lot of people's plans, and so they've come home, and then all of the advice is now sort of get back to work if you can. But then I think quite a lot of bosses will probably be quite unsympathetic to you. Well, you could have just not gone on holiday, is going to be, I imagine, what a lot of their feeling is going to be. So the stat that I was going to sort of talk about that's doing the rounds on social media is the media, I can't remember the wording of it, but I've seen it sort of shared about a bit, is that that the media in the UK is being a bit ridiculous and sort of scaremongering about Spain, because actually our death figures are way worse. And that's technically true. Over the last 5 days, I think it is, we've had 400 and something deaths with coronavirus, and Spain had had 12. But, and so when I first saw that, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Like, we can't really be scaremongering about Spain if our stats are worse. But I did a little bit of digging, and actually, Spain over the last sort of 3 or 4 days have been having, like a few days ago, it was sort of 700 or 800 new cases a day, which is about on par with us. But we've had a little bit of that exponential growth over the last few days. Then it was like 1,300, and actually the last 2 or 3 days have been 2,000 and 2,500 sort of new cases a day. And that's way higher than we've got here. And I think, as I say, the new cases figure is a bit of a better judge, because deaths with COVID, they can be skewed, different methods of reporting deaths, because Spain apparently only report deaths within the last 24 hours, and so any that were sort of out of that window but weren't previously reported won't be in those figures, so actually it will sort of artificially keep the figures low. We, however, have actually been criticised for potentially slightly exaggerating the death figures, because they've been included anyone who has had a positive COVID test kind of ever, who has then died, but that does not necessarily mean they died of COVID or even necessarily had an active case of COVID when they died. Now, I think our figures are fairly fair to follow, because there will, of course, be people who died who never had a COVID test, and they're not included in the figures. Although testing is pretty prevalent now, and I think the testing is sort of fairly good, particularly in a hospital setting. I think anyone who's got even any chance of a COVID case will be having a test. So you can't really compare the death rates of different countries. So that meme that is doing the rounds is a little misleading. Obviously what's happening in Spain is horrible, and they actually were one of the worst until we overtook. They were, I think, the second most hard hit country in Europe after Italy when this first hit. Italy was the first country to get it really bad, followed by Spain, and then we brought up the rear. So the fact that they are now already having sort of the signs of a potential second wave is troubling. And what they've noticed apparently is that the rates of infection in younger people are much higher this time than they were earlier, which suggests that perhaps it's younger people that are being a bit more lax with social distancing rules. So Spain is talking about going into another full lockdown. They haven't done that as yet. What they've done so far is put in curfews, and I think they've closed certain types of businesses. So like nightclubs have been closed, but bars have had like a midnight restriction, so they've got to close at midnight. Again, still encouraging outdoor stuff, but I imagine outdoor stuff in July in Spain, and also actually sort of most holidaymakers and tourism destinations will be largely outdoor, usually like beachfront or, you know, that kind of place anyway, which would largely have people outdoors, poolside and that kind of thing anyway. So it's worrying that even with that being the case out there, for there to be an upswing in infections, because we've been told sort of quite voraciously that outdoor transmission is low. Outdoor transmission is low because of things like fresh air, good ventilation and sunlight. So what concerns me with a potential upswing due to maybe people getting a bit more lax with social distancing in places like Spain is that we're going to see when the weather turns and when it sort of becomes a bit more autumnal and hanging around outside is less viable and less appealing. It's not so bad at the moment. When people are going and visiting friends, it's easy enough to stay in the garden. Even at night, you can maybe light a fire or something like that. And I think people are being pretty good with that. Like, I think that will be people will be less likely to comply with that, I think, when the weather turns. And they still want to see their friends, and
they'll start off with best of intentions and be like, well, we'll sit in the garden, it'll be fine, we'll social distance, and then it'll get a bit cold or a bit wet and
or it'll start raining.
Go, should we just go indoors?
Just sit inside. We'll open the window.
We've had a couple of drinks. We're feeling a bit more relaxed, and we'll.
Yeah.
You know.
So that, I think we will see that. I think, like, to an extent, we already see that. Like, we do know that there's people like mixing indoors more than they should anyway. But I think as long as, for the most part, people are largely complying, then I think that's enough to sort of keep things down. Particularly when the sort of actual infection in the population is low. So if people are taking risks, chances are you'll get away with it. But that will only be the case until it sort of picks up and there's more of it in the sort of population in general. So that is something that is concerning in terms of from our point of view. More locally speaking, though, it's shocking looking at the stats for the UK, because it's not really fair to judge the stats by the UK, because really almost all the active infections and new cases really are happening in England. Looking at the stats, there's hundreds of new cases in England and tens, sometimes single figures in any of the other devolved parliaments. And I think that's just goes to show that the measures that have been taken by the devolved parliaments have worked and are being effective. We're in a slightly, because actually Gwent has done really, considering we were one of the hardest hit areas at the start of the virus when we didn't know as much about it and it was all sort of, everybody was caught a bit off guard. We were kind of the epicenter for the UK sort of outbreak, particularly in terms of population density. We were far outdoing everywhere else. We were having about the same amount of cases as London, which has got several million citizens, and actually there's a few 100,000 in Newport. So the prevalence here was shocking. Considering that was where we were at the start of this, the Gwent has considered, when I say the Gwent, the Royal Gwent Hospital has for a long time had no active COVID cases. So that's not to say there have been no COVID cases in the community, but none that have needed to be hospitalised. And we've had no deaths in our health board for I think 17 days now, which is brilliant. So to come from where we were to where we are is fantastic. And we've also got to consider that we're actually quite close to the border with England. We're the first sort of major town/city you get to once you come from England into South Wales. And there will be people who live here and work in, say, Bristol and vice versa. So the fact that our stats are so low is commendable. But it does mean that actually it looks like the stats in England are pretty shit. So it's certainly not over here, and I would be concerned to be looking towards the future when the weather turns, because actually like one of the things that they've noticed that seems to cause a bit of an upsurge and has been to blame for most localized outbreaks across the world actually have been in places like food processing plants and slaughterhouses and things like that, and it seems to be places where the ambient temperature is kept low. This virus seems to do quite well in low temperatures. So that doesn't bode so well for a British winter.
Make sure the old people are claiming their winter heating allowances.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that our UK government has said that they're going to do, which I'm entirely on board with, is everybody over 50 is going to be eligible for the flu vaccine regardless of underlying health conditions. Usually the flu vaccine is recommended to people who have underlying health conditions, and I think the older generation, so I think it's probably the sort of 70 plus usually, they've said they're going to do it for everybody over 50, which I think is good, because you don't want the perfect storm of seasonal flu hitting at the same time as the second wave of coronavirus, because that will absolutely put undue strain on the NHS that we probably can't handle.
We caught what we think was just a regular flu, didn't we,
God,
last
it was
year?
awful.
And it wiped us out one after the other, didn't it?
Yeah, I'd never really considered that I'd had proper flu. Like, people say they've got the flu when actually they've just got a nasty cold. But yeah, it was sort of, well, it wasn't long after we'd met actually, so it was sort of March, April time last year. And, oh, crikey. Yeah, it was like for me it was sort of, I had about 4 or 5 days of actually bedridden. But I also kind of blame, like, anything else I catch does tend to have a knock-on effect on my fibro. But usually I'm pretty good at powering through, like, a cough and a cold. I think probably due to the really good pain meds I'm on. But this one absolutely floored me. For weeks I wasn't myself after that. And then it was a few weeks later that you got a similar bug, which I think was probably the same. It just must have had a long incubation period, or you bought it off someone else. But yeah, absolutely floored us. And I imagine, yeah, having that sort of thing. Because yeah, same as with this shit. Some people will get coronavirus and shrug it off. Some people will get the flu and shrug it off. But lots of people do die annually from the flu anyway. Like the flu does kill people. Quite often it'll sort of lead to getting pneumonia and things like that, and it'll lead to complications which will kill you. And coronavirus obviously the same. It's got a higher mortality rate than the flu, but it depends on the strain of flu. It's not got a higher mortality rate than Spanish flu, for example, but it seems to have a higher mortality rate than our current sort of strains of flu that we're dealing with. But having that at the same time as a second wave, even with the NHS hopefully being vastly better prepared now. Yeah, there are encouraging things out there. I think basically everybody in the NHS has had very speedy training on sort of coronavirus patients, and sort of additional nursing staff have been trained on ICU and things like that, so that because what we were having was literally nurses and doctors were being scrambled in from anywhere we could find them to care for patients that they didn't necessarily have any previous sort of experience with at all. Which, like, basically quite a lot of it was any pair of hands is better than none, but like intensive care, particularly intensive care nursing and medical care is very specialized, and it's like if you've got no experience on it, it's yeah, I imagine that must have been one of the most terrifying jobs to expect, sort of nurses who've never, like trainee nurses who aren't even fully qualified yet, just sort of being like, yep, there you go, you're going on ICU and we don't have support staff. This is not a training situation. This is a you're on the ground doing the job situation. So thankfully, at least I think they've done like huge amounts of training and resources for people so that there will be more people who are trained in the right things to draw on. So people that maybe usually worked on gastroenterology wards or neurology wards or in midwifery and things like that have now got additional training for the kinds of things that may be needed on specialist COVID wards and specialist sort of ICU for COVID patients. And also we've got like the field hospitals, which largely haven't been used. There've been a few cases in them, but they've not been sort of used to capacity, but we've still got them. And actually some of them I didn't realise, because I sort of imagined with those field hospitals that they were going to be largely for kind of COVID patients who were really desperately ill, and it was going to be overflow of all the COVID patients that we couldn't look after. But actually quite a lot of them were intended for sort of people who needed to be hospitalised, weren't ready to be discharged for whatever reason, but actually to keep them away from the main hospitals and sort of create space in the specialist care in hospitals. So largely for sort of like geriatric patients who aren't able to be released back home for whatever reason because they've got recuperation to do and can't be released into care homes because they don't have a care home place, things like that. So I imagine this coming autumn/winter we will see those come back into use, but hopefully better prepared and better trained. But it's still a concern.
Something to look forward to. And I understand, Ellie, that the government, if I got this right, the government has embarked on a campaign of fat shaming. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure they would put it like that.
No?
But Boris Johnson has come out and sort of said one of the things that we should all do is try to be healthier in these trying times. And one of the things that is a risk factor with COVID is being overweight. Now, I think it is fair to say, and I'm not one to body shame, I'm really not, but I think it is fair to observe that Boris Johnson is not the most svelte-cut figure you have ever seen. And he did get it, and he was in intensive care with it for a bit, so maybe he's speaking from experience and he's about to go on some big sort of health kick himself. But basically they've sort of said they're going to do a big anti-obesity drive and a big health drive, which I guess makes sense. Anything that's going to help, fine. I get where they're coming from. However, seems a bit of a mixed message which we're so familiar with right now, of doing an anti-obesity drive at the same time as a eat out to help out scheme to try and sort of stimulate the economy for restaurants and fast food places. So you'll get like 50% off your meal Monday to Wednesday in high street chains, but go on a diet.
Go to Nando's, but don't get the chips.
Like, it's a bit, that's a mixed message, isn't it?
Well, they're just trying
particularly at a time when, like, money is tight.
Money is tight, and that's another thing they're doing, obviously, is they're talking about introducing a tax on online shopping.
Yeah.
Which
I've got mixed feelings on that.
Me too.
Like, but yeah, you sort of, this has been something that you sort of particularly flagged up. So
I woke up to this news on a sort of hangover this morning, and it didn't particularly fill me with joy. And the thing is, like, a couple of people have said, I sort of reacted to it on Facebook. You know, I acknowledged I was reacting with a hangover and not very positively. But like, and a couple of people have kind of acknowledged, have kind of said, well, you know, they need to do stuff to rejuvenate the high street and things, and they need to. I don't know. There's a bit of me deep down that thinks, why the high street's a failing system? Maybe we go offline and more people work in warehouses instead of shops. I don't know. But that's maybe a bit fatal. I don't know. But I
can see where you're coming from there. I think there's benefits to high street shops, but maybe they need to sort of adapt. And like, maybe people are just shopping differently. And
the trouble is, a lot of investment has gone into like out of town kind of shopping centres and things, and where you need to drive, and like people. Which
like I have a big bugbear for that. We can't, because that actually excludes people who don't drive or have perhaps mobility issues, both of which is me. I struggle with high street shopping, but I certainly can't go to out of town shopping centres. I do rely on online shopping a lot. But that being said, I do understand that actually there are flaws with the system, and it's not necessarily the most eco-friendly, and actually it maybe means that massive global conglomerates benefit and small independent traders lose out. I'm not one to sort of be like, hey guys, support your local Amazon warehouse. But realistically, quite often things I need I can't get on the high street. I've never been able to get on the high street, and I couldn't easily get to them if I wanted to.
And some small businesses can actually sell their stuff online and find like a niche audience, so they wouldn't be able to get passing them by on the high street. So that's another...
There was a good thing that I saw today, actually. You just reminded me of it, which I think maybe this is more the way we should work and actually be more innovative, and this is what I mean about maybe retailers on the high street needing to adapt to survive. Unfortunately, this is only an American company at the moment, but it's called bookshop.org, I think. And basically, it's all independent bookstores, and they have to have a lower number of employees than a certain amount to be included, have all basically been able to put all of their stuff online. So that you can shop any book online and you never need to go anywhere near Amazon or any of the big sort of online retailers, and you will be supporting independent
this is a big, like,
bookstores.
Portal, is it, where you can find
it's like a sort of...
where is this?
It's only in the States at the moment. It's quite new. It's called bookshop.org.
Oh.
But...
Because I've got a book I want.
Yeah, I know you do.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's only in the States. I don't know, because you might be able to go on it and then do international shipping. I'm not sure. So by the way, just as a little shout out, if anybody's got volume 2 of the Infinity Saga on the Marvel
Ultimate Graphic Novel Collection.
That's the one.
That specific
He's
edition.
got 1, 3, 4, and 5, and we need him to get hold of volume 2.
For both of our sakes.
Literally.
So
if anyone knows of anyone,
that sounds like a good initiative. The thing about this, when they start talking about this tax, I don't want the high street to go under, not really, and I don't want people to lose jobs, and it just seems like, I don't know, the solution always seems to be taxing people, and that always
it penalises the poor.
Yeah, it adversely affects poor people more than rich people, and it's the same. They go, well, we don't want people binge drinking, so we'll sort of
put a minimum drink price
and put the tax up on booze, but then you go, well, you're not making other forms of entertainment or alternatives.
Yeah, it's a sticking plaster, and it makes money.
Pubs,
Yeah, no, I agree. I
All
think,
the
like,
same,
as
they
ever,
don't-
it's just the people at the bottom
they go,
end of the
right,
scale that struggle the most.
we want people to eat better, and now, so we're going to have a sugar tax to discourage people to eat sugar, but they don't do anything about making healthy foods more accessible and
No.
affordable for people who can't get them. And
just getting rid of sugar, it's a bit of a sort of a meaningless gesture, because of course, like, processed sugars are bad for you, but so's like aspartame and stuff like that, like artificial sweeteners that you have in diet drinks and energy drinks and things. Like, getting rid of the sugar doesn't necessarily make it healthier. It just makes it a different kind of unhealthy.
And I'm not claiming that we're like impoverished by any stretch of the imagination, right? We're not rich, but we're okay.
We're quite lucky in that we are able to live quite cheaply.
Yes, that is true.
Our overheads are low, because our income is not great, but our overheads are low.
But what we can't do, and I'm sure this isn't unique to us by any means, is we can't afford to run a car.
No.
Really, and we can't. And if we had a car, we couldn't afford like the petrol and everything, the tax and the insurance and everything that goes along with that. So we can't drive
for us, it would
somewhere.
be aspirational for us to work towards sharing a car in future.
Yeah. So what we can't do is drive somewhere, say once a week, and do a big shop, get a boot full of shopping, and bring that home. So our option is like for like a supermarket is a much smaller branch of Tesco's, which has much more limited choice in what you can actually get there.
Absolutely useless for my stuff.
If you're a vegan. And also,
would you like some soy milk?
We know,
because that's about the only thing there that's suitable, and I don't even like soy milk.
No, and we know as well that these chain supermarkets don't charge the same thing in all of their stores. If they can get away with it, they will charge more for an item in a smaller shop,
of course,
where you're like a captive market, than in the big mega stores. So it's more expensive, and there's less choice for us to go to our local shop, so we shop online. That's much more convenient for us, and also, let's face it, that's been the sensible, safe thing to do over the past however many months. And now
I get
the government are kind of going, right, we're going to charge you more and penalise you for
I get the feeling
that.
There's a sense of, oh dear, people have actually taken the advice too well, and we still need people to behave the way they used to in order to keep the economy ticking over. But I think maybe it's the economy that needs to adapt, not just charging the people more. Because charging more for anything right now is kind of a dick move. Like, so many, like, there are people out there who are still on 100% of their salary and they're doing fine. But I think most people and most businesses and most sectors have taken at least some semblance of a hit. Probably people who are already retired are kind of fine, because they've like got the same amount that they had coming in anyway, and hopefully have sort of paid off mortgages and things like that. But like most people who are working, even if they've stayed working all the way through this, chances are their company business hours have maybe been reduced. The opportunities for overtime have perhaps been reduced, things like that. Some staff have been furloughed or like partially furloughed, or if you're self-employed, the amount of work there is that you can do has dried up because people just don't have disposable income right now. So anything right now that's charging people more, I kind of think is not really well thought through, and is, like we keep saying, but it's penalising those on the lowest incomes. Rich people can afford it.
We need to wrap up. I've got one more quick final point on this, which is that I am not an expert in economics by any means, or business. I do not understand how these things work, but it seems very unfair to me that Amazon seems to be able to get away with paying whatever tax it wants, despite making massive amounts of money and treating a lot of its staff
billions in profit
very poorly with their 0-hour contracts and everything. And
yeah, shouldn't they be the ones bearing the brunt of any let's tax online only companies,
and maybe Amazon
appropriately.
Then, some of that money that they get collecting from tax from Amazon, the government could use that to subsidise the high street, or give us all vouchers that we can only spend in shops in the same way they're done with restaurant discounts, and rather than passing on the burden to us to try and tax us out of
could not agree more. Basically, if you're going right, okay, we've got a problem where the sector is uneven and we've got to kind of regulate it, then passing the charges on to the consumer, I think, is not what we should be doing right now. These companies, all right, because the thing is, people talk about, oh well, if you overtax big companies, they won't trade, they'll move away. They won't. Amazon will still always sell stuff in the UK to UK customers because there's a market. They will not disappear. They already register themselves in places like Jersey so that they can avoid tax. But basically, they will, if they pay their fair, because I don't, like, as a small business owner, it drives me fucking mental that massive companies, basically, if they've got huge amounts of profits, they can essentially have a meeting with the government and negotiate how much tax they're willing to pay. No. Flat rate of tax. If small businesses have to pay it, big businesses have to pay it. Fuck you. And essentially, the thing that is important to mention is because people talk about, oh, if you overtax them, you'll be like denying their growth. No. You only get taxed on your profits. If you reinvest your profits into the business, you don't pay tax on them. So you could pay your wages higher, you could invest in new sort of properties, in new stock. All of that comes out before you get taxed. You get taxed on what is left over. These are literally just massive piles of money that they have got left over after doing all of the things they need to do. If you think it's going to stall growth of a company, the company is being badly run. If you're not reinvesting in your own company, if you're not investing in your staff, if you're not working on better working conditions for your staff, better well-being for your staff, and good working conditions, but also like room for growth, of course you need to be reinvesting in your business. However, whatever type of business it is, if you just put all of your profits into the bank and just sit on them, eventually your business will crumble, because you need to be, even if it's just replacing stock, just covering your running costs, even if you're not massively investing in your business, you need, like, all of those normal charges that will come with the day-to-day use of any business. You can invest in your own business as much as you want, and you only get taxed on what's left. So when people talk about having, like, companies like Google and Amazon having billions in profits, that's billions that they have refused to spend on their own infrastructure. So assuming that they have spent loads on their infrastructure, it is literally spare money. Tax the fuck out of it. As far as I'm concerned, that's like, if that's been made off a UK economy, then the UK economy should benefit from it. Like, if that's money that is being spent in the UK by UK citizens, then those profits should go to taxation that should then go into the UK economy. So the fact that we're not taxing big businesses, or taxing them a fucking pittance compared to what they're actually earning. Yeah, the actual amount you might get off someone like Amazon or Facebook or Google might be, say, a couple of billion, which is a huge amount of money. But when you actually look at what the rate they should be paying in corporation tax is, say, 100 billion, then letting them get away with giving you 2 billion is like me going up to the tax man saying, oh, my tax rate for this year is 3.5 grand, is it? Well, I'm going to give you 50 quid, all right? And expecting to get away with it.
And also, particularly with Amazon, it's not as though they seem to be passing on any of those savings to their employees.
No, all their customers.
They have people on 0-hour contracts who treated quite poorly from everything I'm given to understand.
Oh god, yeah, I've heard some horror stories of like time in the Amazon warehouse. Same with actually some other companies as well, like warehouse workers being treated somewhat like cattle. Like, I won't name the company because I don't want to actually sort of get it wrong, but I do know of somebody who worked in a 24-hour warehouse, and they had to wear a tracker on their wrist, and if they at any point during their working hours spent too much time in one place in the warehouse, their pay got docked. But what it led to was massively unsafe conditions, because let's say somebody dropped something or spilled something, they couldn't stop to clean it up because they'd get penalised for staying still for too long. So actually then you've got forklift drivers like driving around warehouses and like coming across something that's spilled or broken, and it's massively dangerous. But also like literally getting like alerts over the tannoy for like employee number 420, why have you been immobile? It's like, Jesus Christ, that's some Orwellian bullshit. That's so demoralizing, and that's the kind of, and like these companies are so driven by nothing but the profit margin, and eventually profits become meaningless if you're not doing anything. Like literally after a certain point, any company, any person after a point, the amount of money you've got, it becomes unspendable. It becomes unmanageable. Billions in profits just sitting, like, they're not doing anyone any good. They're literally just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Well, I wouldn't know myself, but I'd love the opportunity to find out.
Well, there's a joke going around on the internet that's just, well, actually, I'm kind of behind it, but it's just saying that basically billionaires should not, a single person, an individual, should not be able to be a billionaire. And what they should do is you get to £999,999,999, and then everything you get over that point, just, you don't earn anything. So basically, there's no incentive to continue stockpiling money after that point, because you've got more than you could ever fucking spend. And after that, you get a trophy and it says you won capitalism. Well done. And it's true, because, like, you can't do anything with $1 billion. If somebody gave me £1 billion now, the immediate thing I'm doing is giving huge amounts of it to, like, charities, or setting up my own charity potentially, and spending that as best I can. But, like, you can't spend $1 billion. It would take a lot of effort and infrastructure and staff and, like, advice. You can't just spend £1 billion. Like, you can't. Like, there's too much money. So yeah, I'm not down with it. I'm not okay with billionaires, guys. And the fact that there are hundreds of billionaires, and they could solve world hunger. They could solve poverty, basically. They could it could be a universal basic income for everyone.
Cancer research.
They could fix the world, but they're not. They're sitting on the money, and basically the systems are all aiming for that to be their goal. Like, that, we're looking after them. We're looking after their interests, but they're not looking after ours. And that can do one. That can do one, my friends. That's
why we're coming out as full communists.
Democratic socialists, thank you very much. I'm not a commie. Not that I think, basically, I think...
Not national socialists.
No, very much not. Right, I think we should probably call it a day then.
National socialists. Naughty. No. Bad national socialists. Stop it.
I think that might be somewhat underreacting to National Socialism there, but, we all know what the subtext is.
Were clear.
Bad
National Socialists.
Stole a biscuit. Right, so we're going to call it a day there, I think. It's been a slightly longer one, but we had more to fit in. So, going forward, as I say, we're going to do these as often as we can.
Yes.
So, do subscribe if you can. Give us a like, give us a share. Help us get to that 100, guys. It would really mean the world to us. And yeah, get yourself subscribed, and then you'll be alerted whenever we do one of these. We will try and do them as often as we can, and hopefully at some point we'll come to a new actual structure that we will try to stick to, so that you know when one's coming. But you can just keep your alerts on and find out when there's a new one to watch. So there we go. So thank you, guys. Like and subscribe. There's no shame in it.